Every single day, hundreds of television pilots are aired one time, recorded to VHS tape, and then uploaded to the internet, where they sit for decades, unwatched and unloved. Luckily, there is a podcast that cares. On Piloting Error, each episode, we rescue a forgotten pilot and give it more love than it has ever received. And for less than the price of a cup of coffee, you can help sponsor a poor, neglected, failed television pilot by listening and subscribing. Because if you don't, who will? Piloting Error, a bridge burner collective podcast.
Hey, Bill and Rob's listeners, remember you can get every single episode of Bill and Rob's An Excellent Adventure over at our Patreon, patreon.com/BillAndRobs, or just BillAndRobs.com. Here's the thing. You like this Roboween episode? Well, there's 5 more for you to check out, or our entire Planet of the Apes series, or our entire sibling rivalry series. It is wild. We need your support to keep this thing going, so we just ask that if you've got enough money to buy one latte a month, maybe move that money over to the Bill and Rob's Patreon and check out our entire catalog, which now also offers video episodes. Patreon.com/BillAndRobs, ROBS.
Welcome to Bill and Rob's An Excellent Adventure. I'm Bill Tilley.
And I am Rob Schulte. Bill, we are back at it again with a penultimate episode of Roboween here. And we brought back one of our fan favorite guests. The guests keep going, God, bring him back, bring him back. You guys are just not the same. Without Graham Young from Pumpkin Spice Podcast. Hi, Graham.
Hey, Rob, you are too kind, but great for, very thankful for being back.
Yes. I mean, what was that last episode you were on that everyone was just knocking down my door about? What did we watch? Remind us.
Ice Cream Man?
Ice Cream Man with Clint Howard. Wow. A Bill pick.
It was, and possibly one of the strangest movies I have ever selected for my own viewing in probably ever.
Hey.
Really outside my wheelhouse, but really enjoyed the episode.
Yeah. Well, and there was the one actor who was struggling to walk a straight line the whole time. I remember that.
Yeah, there were some struggles all over the place in that particular movie.
Oh man, well, Graham, welcome back. Love having you here. We're in our. So this whole series, because you haven't listened to it yet, because none of these episodes have come out yet, but the whole series are horror or thriller movies that I have on my hard drive that I've either only watched once or never watched, and that I wanted to actually watch and talk about. So, is there any movies like that for you that you were like, because we recently, in the scheme of things, put out a movie called Cruising for Pumpkin Spice Podcast that we were both kind of like, oh, we had heard about it, but it wasn't until we like sat down and watched it that we were like, this movie rules.
Yes. And I just wanted to point out that we dropped that right after the passing of William Friedkin.
Yeah.
So who passed on in August. So we were kind of, unfortunately, kind of up to date on that. But yeah, as far as films that are on my list that I haven't seen that are really,
or that when you saw, you were like, damn, this was on my list for a reason.
Gosh, you got me with one off the top of my head.
Well, I'll give you an example of one that I watched.
Yeah, please do.
Soul Survivor, a couple episodes ago. I was so happy we finally watched this for the pod. Even Bill liked it. He's not even a big horror guy.
Yeah, it was a good movie.
was weird.
Weird.
It took a very strong pivot towards the end, which led to some discussions. But
Well,
yeah.
it did, but it's something that I really enjoyed because when we go farther back into the movie era and I get less CGI and more like single camera and stripped down story, I really like what we're doing with that because I can really focus on the movie like I used to back in the day.
Totally. Well, Graham, if anything comes to you, let us know. But
Yes, I
won't
will.
hold you to
I
it.
will get back to you by the end of the episode, I promise.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's what we do here on Bill and Rob's An Excellent Adventure is the hard-hitting questions that stump our guests. That's what we love to do.
Yes, nothing better than the awkward silence of trying to get an answer out of somebody who was not prepared for the question.
And that is not on you. That's on us.
Yeah, it is.
I didn't put it in the outline. That's on me.
Rob's trying to steer us into shock jock territory, Graham, and I'm just
I gotcha.
fighting it
that-
all the way.
That's
Now,
kind of his
Graham, if you could-
personality.
If you could sit on your speaker, that would be great.
Yeah. Mm.
Okay, Bill. This episode is on The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, which I forgot to put the date in, but it's 1992's The Hand That Rocks the Cradle,
Mhm.
which there's another movie called The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, but this is not a remake. This is not a reimagining. This is just another movie from the same title. This is, arguably the more famous one and the one that has way more Gilbert and Sullivan songs in it.
Did not remember that. Don't know what it is with. I've got more Gilbert and Sullivan in my life than I ever knew. And it keeps coming up between Star Trek movies and this movie and some other things I've been watching. It's the Pirates of Penzance must be like, I don't know, the Citizen Kane of musicals. It's just that thing that everybody needs to watch or something. But it is.
Yeah.
It's behind me right now, isn't it? Looking over my shoulder. I can feel it.
No, that's Godzilla.
That's true.
Yeah. Bill, well, let's start with you, Graham. Before I read the back of the box, had you seen this before?
So I remember seeing posters for it in the video store.
Yes.
And seeing the box, the cover art, and it kind of had that indecent proposal kind of vibe.
Yes.
Where, dating ourselves a little bit, I was a young kid walking through the video store, and there's a husband and wife and somebody in between them.
Ooh, yeah. And this is like the era of, Fatal Attraction.
Yeah.
Basic Instinct. Sleeping with the Enemy.
Jade.
Ooh, single white female.
Yes.
Well, Bill, how about you? You did say you had seen it before, but it had been a minute.
Yeah, I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it whenever it had come out on cable. So I'm 19 years old at the time this movie came out. So not too long after that. I know it was still new. And yeah, this is the era of the something is slashing right through the cover of your VHS tape. So that's how you know things are going to be so real and so bad. But yet
the poster is ripped.
The poster is ripped. And I really looked forward because this is a movie that I saw once. I remembered the gist of it. I didn't remember every detail. And I was looking forward to us doing this because I wanted to see if I would still feel the way I felt about it after watching it as I thought I felt about it before you brought it up. So
Okay.
This was a good watch for me.
I'm very interested in your take, Bill.
Yes. Me too. I had never seen this movie, but I definitely, like you guys, remember the VHS cover and the poster. And I thought this was the movie where the like a rabbit gets boiled, but that must be like Fatal Attraction.
Oh, Rob, you innocent child.
Is that Fatal Attraction?
Yes.
That is
Okay.
Fatal Attraction.
Yeah.
Which was recently remade into a mini series on Paramount Plus, I believe, starring Joshua Jackson, Pacey from Dawson's Creek.
I'm very perplexed by these shows that are being made out of single old movies.
Yeah.
Not that it can't be done, but there's a lot of these movies. Like I saw that movie, it said everything it needed to say in its runtime. Not sure how you stretch that out, and therefore not sure that's such a great idea. So I would be curious to watch that movie, as I've seen it several times. FYI, not a good date movie.
Yeah.
Oh,
Don't pick that.
worst,
No, not the worst.
but bad.
That tier for me goes worst. Silence of the Lambs.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Second,
Okay.
Basic Instinct. Third, Fatal Attraction.
Well, and it's also like that's interesting you say that, Bill, because we were watching, what was it, Arlington Road last week, and you were telling me that there's talks of it becoming a miniseries.
Yeah, and I wish that all these things were being genesised from someone who's a fan of this property and sees potential, therefore that's why this is happening in the first place, versus the standard Hollywood line today of like finding an old IP and going, well, we can do something with this.
Yeah.
Let's just kind of redo the same thing, but we'll modernize it a little bit and we'll make it 4 to 10 hours longer than it needs to be.
My favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't I read the back of the box and then we can get into some more segments. All right, here we go. Get ready for edge of your seat excitement with the hit that rocked the nation. In this entertaining thriller, Claire Bartel, Annabella Scorio, who's from The Hard Way and Internal Affairs, has the perfect life and family, and exactly what Peyton Flanders, Rebecca De Mornay, Risky Business, desires desperately. But once Peyton deceptively becomes the Bartels' live-in housekeeper, how far will she really go when the life she wants belongs to someone else? From absorbing start to heart-stopping finish, this critically acclaimed winner delivers a lively mix of thrills, chills, and surprises, equaling 100% fun. What? Back of the box.
I have issues with this box.
Yeah. Nothing about this movie was fun.
No, nothing about this is fun. And the writing, as it starts out, the second sentence, in this entertaining thriller, like this isn't being written for your garden club. There's like these weird sprinkles of Tea Party verbiage here and there that just don't fit with these quasi Friday the 13th meets some kind of weird nanny movie that they're trying to go for. It's just a weird box.
This ain't First Wives Club.
No.
You know?
No.
This is, and let's put it out there, this movie has some problems, and I am pinning it on the 90s. You know how they say, and Graham, I want your thoughts on this before we get into the segments. Like, Wes Craven has a quote about Scream where it is very influential, and one of the reasons is because it's being made towards the end of a decade, right? It comes out in 96, but like people are already thinking to the end, and anything made towards the thinking process of an ending inherently has a certain take. Well, this is like the beginning of the 90s, so it feels like we got to do something different. We have to make a movie from the things we've learned from the past, and it feels like it shows up in ways that don't age very well at times. What do you think?
That's very astute of Craven, and thanks for bringing that up because I've never heard that that analysis. But yeah, so with The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, 92, moving into a new decade, and it's sort of trying to be the 90s film, and it's just too early to be the 90s film yet because we don't know what the 90s are.
Yeah, like Scream is the 90s film because we're already preparing for the 2000s.
Yeah.
And it's 1 year after the midpoint of the 90s.
96, yeah.
Yeah. Bill, I don't know. Does that ring true to you at all?
Yeah, I see your point. When the 90s started, you are getting what I would call a more positive look towards female leads and being stronger leads in the movies, but there's still a lot of these movies are, the woman who's becoming strong because she has to, not like she starts out that way. So it's not like a Ripley and Aliens thing where from pretty much minute one, you can see she's tough and she's just going to get tougher. They're letting the housewife character become the home defender, and they're letting the murderer become, the beautiful blonde who's had this thing go wrong. And it's the slowest kind of progress. So you can see it easily now, and you always can when you look back 10, 20, 30 years. But at the time, we're creeping forward. And so we mentioned earlier, you get a lot of movies like Sleeping with the Enemy and Basic Instinct, where the main villain is Glenn Close, who is a woman. Now, of course, a lot of them are portrayed as some form of what they would just call crazy back then. Something's driven them over the edge. It was rarely that they were just manipulative or anything like that. But, it's moving in that direction. But like you said, we hadn't really gotten to where the 80s are gone. This is just the tail end. The 80s are just now over. We're moving into this new decade. So I know that one of the people that was up for this role in a movie was Sybil Shepherd. And I know she said she turned it down because she felt this movie was anti-feminist. With its role of like, lines like "you don't let another powerful woman in your house" and things like that, which I agree. I see her point. I absolutely see her point there. So,
and I think as we give our, Graham and I were texting about this, I think there's like a huge glaring point that Sybil Shepherd hits right on the money, but we'll get there. I'm sure
we will get there. But I mean, I will say, having progressed through this time, these are the kind of movies that 5 years earlier, definitely because I'm a teenager then, I wouldn't have cared anything about. Yeah. But this is a movie I watched later because I see interesting actors and I see interesting people. And I'm not going to pretend that seeing Rebecca De Mornay on a poster was not a reason to watch this movie. Yeah. But, on the plus side of that, she delivers a hell of a performance. So I'm glad that these kind of movies exist because they are the movies that were starting to push things in a new direction and eventually a better direction, one way or the other, hopefully.
Totally agree. Gents, should we start off our patented segments?
Absolutely.
Bill, would you like to explain to Graham what I've been doing this season?
Oh, our friend Robs has resurrected a thing that I toyed with when we first started the show. He's given fun titles to our segments. So we still have our overall name, but then Rob's come up with a great little title for each one.
Yeah, so our first segment is the fun facts we've figured out from this movie, and I'm just calling it, I am the very model of a modern Major General. So I will tell you guys, I toyed with naming every segment after a Gilbert and Sullivan song, but that just became too tiring, and just saying I am the very model of a modern Major General is enough.
You got that in the first take, both times you said that.
Well, I think I stumbled a bit the first time.
No. It was good. Go with that. I'm your director.
I just want to know, is this our musical episode? Is this what we're doing? Because everybody else gets one. We haven't done one yet, Robs.
No.
Okay. We'll save that for when we do like the
we haven't hit
series.
The musical nebula like they did in Strange New Worlds.
Yeah, I'll save mine for when we review Xanadu.
I'm holding you to that. Anyway, I'll go first. How about that? So Christopher McDonald, most people might know him as Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore, turned down the part of Michael in this movie. And instead we got Matt McCoy, who a lot of people our age know as the most famous version of Lloyd Braun on Seinfeld. Lloyd Braun, not when he's working for Mayor Dinkins and the name tags come up. That's a different actor playing Lloyd Braun. This is Lloyd Braun after he's gotten out of the mental institution.
Yeah.
Oh, Lloyd Braun. I love it. Graham, did you happen to figure out any fun facts?
Yeah, actually, I was going to mention a quick one that I sort of alluded to before we started recording. The creepy doctor in the movie is played by Q from Star Trek.
Yes. Yeah.
Also, I did want to mention that...
And Star Trek Picard, by the way.
Yes, he did come back for that. I did not see that season. I'm going to take your word for that he was in it. So they say, Rob. I would know for a fact. But also, I just wanted to see a fun fact was that this was directed by Curtis Hanson, who later did LA Confidential, which won lots of awards, including a couple of Academy Awards. So it's funny for him to do I'm just going to say kind of a quote unquote sleazy movie like this. And then, a couple of years later, win Oscar gold.
Yeah, that is awesome. I love, this is a sleazy movie.
It is.
It's got some sleaze to it. And it's horny.
It is. Yeah.
Anyway, Bill, what did you come up with?
Sorry, I'm just stuck on sleazy and horny for a second. All right,
aren't we all?
I don't think you're wrong because these kind of movies had to have some kind of sex appeal in them to get you to watch them. That's fine. That's what they were. Speaking of Curtis and sex appeal, so there's a scene in this movie where Rebecca De Mornay's character kind of has to have a little bit of a freak out because she's just overloaded, and she goes into a bathroom stall and just tears the place apart. And it's a heck of a scene, and Curtis Hanson said that when they went to film that scene, he started to give Rebecca some direction on, kind of what he thought it should be and what it would do. And apparently, according to him, she just looked up at him and said, "Curtis, I've had tantrums. Let me show you." And then they got in the chair, hit the camera, and she just erupted and went absolutely insane on this bathroom stall like a champ. And Curtis said he and the cameraman were just stunned. They're looking down, just stunned. And when it was over, she was just like, "How's that?" And he's like, "I wanted to kiss her." It was just amazing. And you watch the scene, you can see it's like, there wasn't a lot of direction in this. This is just her letting it loose. And it's like, okay, this is awesome. And I think there's probably a lot of Rebecca in this scene, and you might want to show some respect.
Yeah. Also, when she kicks the shit out of that 10-year-old.
Some of you, now, do you think you'd get away with that scene today?
I think you would, because I think it's so outlandish that it was probably even at that time being like, oh my God, this person is evil, right?
Oh,
it's just, it's
100%.
And she calls the kid a mother effer.
Yeah. Oh, Graham, you can say the full word on this.
Okay. Not to offend anyone.
No.
We have sensitive ears for the hand that rocks the cradle episode.
It's one of those scenes that, of course, you can apply today's standards to it, but I'm always looking at it now going, all right, strange woman who just walks onto the playground.
Yeah.
No supervision, no things. But this was true. I mean, you could have done this back in the day. There's probably one teacher there, and you could have walked onto a playground and handed some kid his ass if you really wanted to. Yeah. And now it's like, oh no, there's 19 felonies that she just committed right here on the spot. So boy, times they haven't changed.
Yes, they have.
That is the big thing. I agree. I think you could get away with the scene itself. What you couldn't get away with is the believability that someone could just be on school grounds.
Right. Yep.
Man. Well, this is an interesting fact I learned, guys. Rebecca De Mornay does play Peyton in this movie and has appeared in movies like Risky Business and Runaway Train, an amazing film. But Rebecca De Mornay is also the name of a charity worker in Seinfeld, another Seinfeld connection, portrayed by actor Sonia Eddy. Now, Rebecca De Mornay, the character, appeared twice in Seinfeld. In season 8's The Muffin Tops, where she's complaining about the stumps left behind at the homeless shelter where she works. And in season 9's The Bookstore, when she threatens to beat up George Costanza if he doesn't get his tainted art book out of the thrift store. I just, round the room, what do you think it was? Because this reminds me of the Curb Your Enthusiasm, where Larry David stays at Rennie Harlan's apartment, right? Why is there a character named Rebecca De Mornay in Seinfeld when she's a famous actor?
Seinfeld did that kind of stuff. I mean, he had George driving John Voice LeBaron at one point. Like, they just like to throw out this well-known name in an absurd situation. So you're sitting there going, even if this actor does not appear on screen, this cannot be who they're talking about. Something's got to be wrong.
Well, and the interesting thing about the John Voight thing is that it ends up being a punchline that it's a different John Voight. But like Rebecca De Mornay, there's no punchline to it. It's just the character's name. Staying at Rennie Harlan's apartment in New York, there's no punchline to it. It's just like staying there.
I bet you anything that they had cast Rebecca, and then at the last second she couldn't do it, and the writers were just like, we don't want to change it. Just, cast someone who's blonde.
Yeah, well, it's definitely not that. It is.
Could be, or they could have been somebody who was like, let's do this, and maybe we'll coax her into actually being on the show if she thinks we did this because we're big fans.
Ooh, I like that. That would be good.
I'm actually leaning more towards that idea. I think you're right about that, Bill.
Yeah, that's true. Because then like the Rennie Harlan thing, getting Rennie Harlan on an episode of Curb, that's the goal, right?
They had Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, exactly. Bill, what's your other fun fact?
So there's a scene in the movie where Rebecca's character confronts Ernie Hudson of Ghostbusters fame. He plays Solomon, the handyman, and they're outside. He's basically caught her doing something she shouldn't be doing. And so she corners him in the garden and has a bit of a talk with him. Very scary talk. And during it, she kind of gives him a not small slap on the face. Well, I found an interview with Ernie Hudson, and he said he did not know the slap was coming. It looked real on camera because it was real. He said Rebecca would come to set. She was one of those people that kind of was in character mode. Maybe not like she made them call her by her stage name, but just in the zone. And he was like, oh, this is something that's going to happen. And so they have the scene. She gives him a pop across the jaw. When it's done, they go off to the side. And then she said, she looked at me and went, is it okay that I did that? And he said, I guess it's going to have to be now. You've already done it.
Yeah.
So he's like, I was not expecting that, but it's okay. So I'm always amused by these little moments in film where somebody's just done a thing to get somebody's reaction. You find out, yeah, that really hurt, or they were really scared. And you can see in his eyes, he's like, damn, that wasn't in the script.
No kidding. Well, Graham, do you have any other facts, or should we move on to the next segment?
Why don't we just move on to our Lloyd Braun section?
Yes, Lloyd Braun likes. It's just going to be likes because I like Lloyd Braun, and there's few times we're going to actually be able to talk about Lloyd Braun on this podcast.
One thing I do love about this movie is I love that it's a thriller set in the real world with a plausible scenario. I mean, it looks really great. The film's shot really well. It's all on location in Seattle, which this is what Curtis Hanson said he wanted. He wanted it all to be believable. It's an outlandish scenario, but everything's based in a possibility that it could happen. So people catfish all the time. People lie. People cheat. People do crazy stuff, and they steal other people's identities. So all that worked out really well. And of course, it's a scenario. How do you get a stranger in your house? Well, of course, they've got a baby and they need help. So there's an automatic end to that kind of thing. And it's just something that people do all the time. And you think to yourself, well, I guess if I wasn't careful, like everybody in this movie is not careful, this could happen to me. So I always enjoy these movies that set themselves up in that's a thing that happens. Let me show you how this can go horribly, horribly wrong. And just sit there and watch it all come together. So I really like that.
I totally agree. And I'll just say, because it's one of my likes too, is just how competently it's shot. But I do feel like I'm there. It doesn't feel like a film. There's aspects of it. This is the hard thing to put your finger on. It being in Seattle and always being cloudy, but always being so lush and green. That element of it doesn't feel fake. The sets that they did have to use seamlessly interacted with like the real life areas, the houses, the offices, that sort of stuff. So I totally agree. And it does feel, for when you have such a wild idea, like a really out there one that can feel realistic, is such a good point.
And I noticed that a lot of the shots in this film are long distance. So to me, they feel like the perspective of just somebody who I'm passing by and I see a thing. Like when Rebecca's character takes the baby for a stroll, or they're out and about in the town, they're far across, as if you would be across the street watching what's going on. Even some of the most intense stuff that happens is from a distance.
Yeah.
So it's really gives you almost kind of a voyeur-esque feeling when you're watching it, which adds a little bit to the creep factor and kind of made me feel a little bit unsettled, going, oh, I feel a little creepy for watching this, which just adds to the movie, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree. It's just, there's something about this film. I don't know. What about you, Graham? What's something you liked about it?
Well, to kind of add to what you both have said, 2 words: great movie house. You know, we watch movies all the time. We're like, oh, that's a kind of a cool house for events to happen.
Yeah.
And this was a great movie house. The attic where the final confrontation takes place kind of reminded me of the barn from Friday the 13th series, especially when someone gets pushed out of a window, although it does take them 2 times to push them out. We'll get into that. But no, it's a great house. Like you guys said, the atmosphere and just the city of Seattle, you know, we don't get to see enough movies that take place in Seattle. Need a good job of covering it. The second thing I liked, and this is a bit kind of controversial because the character is problematic. I love Ernie Hudson. You know, and what's cool about him is that he's got lots of different fan bases that like him. Like they love him for Ghostbusters, or they love him for Oz, which I actually just rewatched all of that. I would like to think that the makers of Oz maybe looked at The Hand That Rocks the Cradle and saw range as an actor. Okay, again, the character is very problematic. I actually don't know why they have a mentally handicapped person in the movie and what they're trying to say with that, except maybe to be accepting of all people. But it's a little, I don't know. It just doesn't really work for me. Again, but
I think this is the 1992-ness that we were talking about. Yes.
But again, it's Ernie Hudson. I know a lot of people from like that love Ghostbusters love Ernie, but if you have a strong will and determination, give Oz a shot. It's not the easiest show to watch, but he's great in it.
Totally agree. There's a lot to be said about Ernie Hudson in this movie. I mean, there's the joke from, you know, like Tropic Thunder, right? Simple Jack. And then there's the idea that like, if you can play mentally challenged, like, then you're like somehow the best type of actor. And I think people did believe that for a while, but I think more on that later, because it's something I kind of like. We all know it's like weird. You just don't do that now, but it does show range for Ernie Hudson. And when he's scared, he is scared in this film.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say that I liked is something Bill touched on earlier, and that's just that Rebecca De Mornay and Julianne Moore kicked ass in this movie. I wish I could say Lloyd Braun kicked ass, but he didn't really get much time to shine in it.
Unlike Ernie Hudson, he doesn't have very much range.
Yeah.
No, Debonani Rawl had it handed to him there at the end. Although he did have one of the most chiseled beards I've ever seen on a screen actor at any time.
That thing did not move at all. And we only get one scene of him shaving at the very beginning.
Yeah, and he gets interrupted. He doesn't even get the full neck shave going on.
Oh,
he looks like Kenny Loggins' brother.
Yes. Wow. George Loggins.
Lloyd Loggins.
Yeah. Lloyd Loggins.
There you go.
Wow. You can be a star.
Yeah, and no, this is pre Jurassic Park, pre everything Julianne Moore. Like, she hadn't done anything really that big except for this movie. This was like a real first starring role for her, and she just goes right at it, and you're watching her going, yeah, she's gonna do things. This is gonna be great.
She's gonna be in the sequel to The Silence of the Lambs. She's gonna be in the remake of Psycho.
Yeah. All the classics, Rob.
Yep.
It's all any actress or actor wants is just to be having all the best remakes.
All the best.
That's your specialty.
But although Magnolia, come on, she was great. Bill, what else do you have for us?
Well, I get to harken back to Graham's comment from earlier. Casting John Delancey as the evil doctor is genius because Delancey's amazing. He plays so many great roles of somebody that you don't want to like pretty much right from the start. He's your guy. His creep factor in this movie is about a 12.5 on a 10 scale. The only thing I have against him, he's not in this movie very long. It's very brief. And his setup is very fast. But we watch what he gets in trouble for, being sort of a sexual predator. And I got to say, I think he would have been caught long before Claire ever made it into the office. His method of getting what he wants is not sly in the least. He's going to be nailed 10 minutes after he opens the doors in his office. And I'm like, come on, man. It actually made me think of him as, I'm not justifying his actions in any means, but it's like, you're also kind of dumb, dude. This is not a good thing that you're doing here in any way. And if you want to get caught, you're not good at it. So it's rough. But he sells the creepy part, which is what he was there to do.
Yeah. And it's so interesting you say this, like, no justification for it, but it's weird, like, how he obviously can do, he's so comfortable in it that the first time he gets caught, he kills himself.
Yeah.
Very, very intense. And his wife, Rebecca De Mornay, I don't understand how, like, obviously she snaps in some way, shape, or form because of it, but like somehow a part of her is like just blocks out the bad part and only wants to I don't know. It's interesting. Well, should we move on to the next segment?
Absolutely. Where should we take this segment to, Rob? Maybe someplace with some plants and some glass ceilings that we can dangerously be under?
Yeah, you're speaking my language. If we're going to talk about the things we disliked in the movie, we should probably head for some greenhouse effects. Graham, would you like to start?
Yeah, I would, because I'm just kind of like extending or kind of adding on to what you just said as far as the doctor. And then the big thing that didn't work for me is our villain's motivation.
Yeah.
Clearly her husband is a bad person. That's sort of like shown right for the audience. And instead of being mad at her husband, she takes it out on the woman who was the whistleblower.
Yeah.
And that is just, from the get-go, I could not get on with. I just was like, be mad at your husband. Or, I was thinking, like, if the wife character was like a jilted lover and lied about it or something, that would maybe give her motivation. But the fact that she did the right thing and prevented this man from molesting other women, and then she's like punished for it.
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
Yeah. It's a weird connection of the dots. That's for sure. I was thinking about that a little bit, and there's like, maybe I'll save this. I'll talk about it before Five Nights for $1. But if I don't, remind me that there's just a lot of pieces that don't have to be the way they are to still get to the same movie, right? And so that's kind of, it's a little jilted there. I just want to say one quick dislike I had is something we touched on before, and it's in that same element, and that's the Ernie Hudson thing. It's like, he's got range, he does things. We don't have people play, mentally challenged this way anymore. He could have just been a handyman. Like he didn't have to also be challenged.
I guess that's some type of inclusion or acceptance,
Yeah,
or just
fair.
because someone's different, doesn't mean that their heart isn't good or whatever. And I get that, but it just didn't land for me, and it seemed kind of not that genuine.
And I don't think I'm smart enough to actually say like every part of this, but like it does feel like they're trying to do something that just doesn't land the way they think it's supposed to. Yeah.
And I will be interested in our next segment because I have a point about him that I think they unintentionally have a reason for this.
Ooh.
I don't think they meant to have a reason. I think that's just how this worked out. And there's one point in the story that I think if his character were anything else, none of this would have worked. But that's for our next section.
Okay. Well, what do you got for this section?
I do agree with your assessments of how, this is what Hollywood does. They're not going to hire somebody who's mentally challenged to play mentally challenged. Now we would look to do that because we know that. So they just wanted actor who is good at this part. So nothing, as you've mentioned, Ernie's great in portraying the part, and you have to pick a thing that shows the audience what you're trying to be. He is a actor trying to project someone who has a mental challenge, and he at least found one that I found not insulting and very competent for a lot of reasons. Yeah. That if this were a real person who in the real world, he's very likable and very competent in what he was doing with his trade. So I'm glad they at least got that part. And it wasn't just somebody that they are constantly humoring and giving token tasks around the house just because they feel sorry for him.
And Hollywood loves likability.
Oh, yeah.
What do you have for your greenhouse effect, Bill?
Well, one of my main ones is that, and I think we might have alluded a little to it earlier, involving Peyton, i.e. Victoria Mott, who is the wife of the evil doctor in this movie. So this movie basically hinges on the fact that neither Claire nor Michael ever knew of the wife of the man they accused of sexual assault.
Yeah.
And I just kept thinking, how is this possible, considering what a traumatic event this was? She had to be in the news. They had to be interviews. They had to go into their past. Her backstory should have been spread with his backstory on every news outlet. It would have been in every tabloid. They would have followed her around with 1,000 pictures. But considering that Michael and Claire do exactly 0.0% of a background check on this woman that they just decide to let into their house and live with their children and run their lives. I mean, I guess within the framework of this movie, it is possible, but there is a whole lot of conceit that we're going to say nobody knows who she is and just everybody's going to play along with it. It's just the one major element in this movie that cracks believability right from the start, but you kind of have to just go, all right, acknowledge it and put it to the side and just keep going. But it's a big hole in this movie.
Yes.
And to that point, she wants a live-in nanny, an au pair even, so that she can build a greenhouse.
Yeah, their lives are strange. Claire and Michael's lives are strange. Graham, you mentioned the house, and I was well into this movie, and I kept thinking, what the hell do these people do for a living? They don't ever say, what does he do? What does she do? Because this house costs a ton. And they're building what I now, as a homeowner, know, no fence is cheap. There ain't no greenhouse cheap. There's a staff of people running around. It's like, dude, what do you do? And even when they say what Michael does is he's like a biological engineer, I'm going, it doesn't sound right. But at least they got there.
Loves musicals.
Yeah. Gilbert and Sullivan, I hear.
It's very odd. And of course it's, the economic boom of the 90s, but I still don't believe it. I was just going to say the other thing I don't like, and Graham, this kind of goes back onto your point too. I don't think I like knowing the bad person, the villain, is bad the whole time in a movie, because it just makes me point out like everyone's lack of critical thinking skills. So
Yes.
also hinges on your point too, Bill. It's like, okay, there's something to be said about following the villain through a movie, but when you can see other people just being like, hum-de-dum-de-dum, okay, love ya, this is great, and then you can see her like using the baby monitor or whatever, it's just like, no. The whole time I'm just thinking like, you idiots, like, why are you doing this? It's tough. But Graham, any other dislikes you'd like to speak about on?
The villain's motivation's kind of the big one.
Yeah.
I guess for like sort of final dislikes, as far as your erotic thriller goes from the late 80s, early 90s, this is maybe lower tier for me.
Mm. You'd rather watch Basic Instinct?
From my favorite living filmmaker.
Yeah. Paul Verhoeven?
Yes.
I almost put L on this series this year.
That is also a 5-star movie.
It's terrific.
Yes.
Yeah, I watched Basic Instinct the same week I watched this, and my biggest takeaway is that, like, wow, 2 Seinfeld characters in 2 erotic thrillers, and then also Michael Douglas isn't as cool as the movie wants him to be in Basic Instinct.
Michael Douglas is a great force on screen, but there are moments when he's put in certain situations where he feels like insurance agent that's just stretched to his limit.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I don't know, man, you're not pulling. I guess I equate it to the same thing I say about Tom Selleck. I like Tom Selleck a lot, especially as an actor, but the one thing that he can't do is look stupid.
Yeah.
Like, he can't, when there's a scene where he supposedly is dumb or unobservant, he can't pull it off, because you're like, no, dude, you're a smart person. You just look too smart for that. Michael Douglas kind of has that same thing where it's like, clearly you've been asked to reach a little too far for whatever the situation is, but then he just shakes and he yells and his hair never moves and everything's great.
Well, and I'm sorry, Michael Douglas sticks out like a sore thumb in a nightclub themed like a Catholic church. So
it's one of my favorite Paul Verhoeven scenes. That I think even in the behind the scenes, he admits just how ludicrous the scene is in Basic Instinct, where the middle-aged people go to dance in the discotheque. But
this movie needed more discotheques.
What this movie needed was Tim Thomerson in the Punk Club from Trancers in that same situation. Yes. And then this works beautifully.
Yes. Bill, did you have a final Greenhouse moment?
Yep, and it all dovetails back into the things we've said. Everyone in this movie either has selective amnesia or the worst judgment in the world, because every time a bad thing happens, they dismiss the trauma near immediately. And it is not until 3/4 of the way through the movie that Claire notices that, all these things started to happen when Peyton came into our lives. It's like, she's the only one in the room or in the vicinity every time these things go wrong, man. And she's the stranger in your life. Of all the people on screen, you know her absolutely the least. You don't question any of this, to the point where there's a scene where she attempts to seduce Michael. And after that scene ends, you see him again and they're just smiling at a picnic with her and the kids. It's like, dude, that happened, like, according to you, about 8 hours ago. And you're just over
that
it.
Is getting fired.
Yeah, and she still has her job. This is not a hallmark of the 90s. This complete acceptance and unlimited second chances. Oh no, this is not how we rolled in 1992 movie. You're out of here, lady, in a heartbeat.
Oh man, I love it. Well, I also love moving on to new segments, though, gentlemen. So I think we should move on to where we talk about our amusing moments, which I'm calling Smoking with Friends. Some people, you don't smoke, you quit smoking, but you smoke with friends when you're having a grand old time.
Of all the things that have changed in the years since, it is just amazing that when I watch a movie now with smoking in it, it's like I'm staring back going, I was bred from cave people. Look what we did. Not that I did. I didn't smoke, but I recognize this.
And the scene where he comes home after smoking with Julianne Moore, saying he's been at the lab, and she's like, "You smell like cigarettes." It's like, you would have smelled that cigarette from the moment he walked in the house.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't take kissing. Like,
no, you get undressed down the street and you leave your clothes in the neighbor's yard if you don't want her to smell it.
He wouldn't have even had to smoke a cigarette. He was in a restaurant where they were all smoking around him. You cannot just come home and say, like, I was at the lab, honey. Like, the smoking lab, maybe. Where they're developing hip new cigarettes for children. Now, I will start, because I haven't started in a moment. We got to talk about the asthma trope.
Yeah.
I would like to talk about how I had asthma as a youth that somehow went away, I think. I guess it's known to do that from time to time. After you pass puberty or something, that's what I'm equating it to. I had one of those inhalers. I never took the inhaler the way she does, where she holds it about a foot away from her face before inhaling. Maybe that's a type of inhaler. I don't know. But I would like to share this story because it does go to show you like how ridiculous the times were. Because I would say probably around 1995 or so, just a mere 3 years after this movie, I'm a young lad in middle school, maybe junior, maybe elementary school, but still, I've got asthma. But it's brought on by my allergy to cats, mostly, right? When my dad worked nights, I would have to stay at my aunt's house, who had cats and cat dander absolutely everywhere. I would not be able to sleep. I would be like, until my dad would pick me up at like 2 a.m. to take me home. And every single time I would be like, I can't sleep here. Like, I cannot fucking breathe, even with an inhaler. I cannot breathe in this home. And they were like, well, we got you out of there. And it's just like, okay, next time he goes to work and I get dropped off and I'm just like, like breathing out the window of this house, like borderline like child abuse. I'm not actually saying it's child abuse, but like, they just don't think, they just don't know. And then to see the asthma trope in movies where you're like, oh, she's getting an asthma attack from like being scared. And maybe that's a thing, but it feels a little bit more like movie magic to me.
I have a family member who has asthma, and it is extreme like that.
Yeah.
I knew that, but most of hers is always brought on by overexertion. I've never.
Sure. Yeah. I had that too, for sure. Yeah,
never the fear factor, but I was willing to go with it until she kept firing her inhaler past her mouth because it's this movie inhaler. And I'm like, is that your version of Rob? Did you ever shotgun an inhaler? Is that how you do that on screen?
No, I remember having one that looked exactly like that. And they said, make sure to wrap your lips around it so it goes in your lungs. Very odd. Very odd. But I guess asthma was a big trope thing in movies and TV at the time. It was this, I don't know, maybe they felt people didn't know enough about it that they could just use it for whatever they wanted for a plot device.
Probably, but it was also something that was common enough that just like you described, it's like we get the gist of it. And if the movie tells us this is how bad it is, then we're pretty much willing to believe that that's how bad it is.
Yeah. Bill, what's something that you found amusing?
I'm going to say I found a lot of things amusing in this movie. I wish I could honorable mention so many of them. So many of them. But one of them is the surprise party scene.
Good Lord.
Claire has a birthday. They've set up a clandestine surprise party for her. And it's the same night where she has come home convinced that Michael's sleeping with Marlene, his former girlfriend, and their friend's current wife. And they have a big blow up in the kitchen. And it is so bad. Like I'll give Matt McCoy credit. When he does this scene, I'm thinking I could absolutely see this being my reaction of like, mother.
Like, come
really
on.
After all the things we've gone through, we got to do another one. But she has an absolute meltdown, and then he is like party in the next room, And so most people, I think, probably would have ran out of the house. But no, Claire kind of wanders into the room, and there's all her friends standing there in silent shock. And there's Marty Craven, Marlene's husband, who's just heard one of his friend's wife accused him of sleeping with his wife, holding the cake. And Marty just goes, "Surprise!" and does the bit. And I'm like, now that's a team player. I love Marty.
Really.
He's just committed to it, going, I'm just going to see this through.
I guess so.
I got one job, is to hold this cake and yell surprise, and by God damn it, I'm going to do it.
Everyone else may be fucked up. I'm not fucking up my role.
And he does it with a smile, like in kind of a half grin. He doesn't drop the cake and storm out when Marlene does. He just soldiers on through, and I'm just like, I laughed so hard. Good. Way to go, Marty. You doormat.
So good. Graham, what about you?
Well, something that we kind of touched on as far as all the adult characters being naive or stupid. But the smartest character in the movie is the little girl.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really amusing. In the third act, the only reason anyone survives is because of her. And she uses the baby monitor in a very cool way to trick the villain to go into the wrong room. She, I was impressed by her intelligence and ability to survive.
Yeah, totally. I think that character doesn't give enough credit because, she goes on, she's still acting to today,
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I think a lot of times, like when we watched Arlington Road, Bill, last week, that kid is plot device child, right? Mm-hmm. Like, my mom is dead, so I have to like touch her grave and hug my dad and be used as a distraction point. But this is like a fully fleshed out child who like has conflicting behavioral issues depending on if she's with Peyton or with the mom, but like has to overcome an actual challenge too, which
she goes full Rambo in the tunnels at the very end of this movie. And the thing that caught me off guard was, and like I said, I didn't remember every scene. I'd forgotten this part entirely. And I'm thinking to myself, this movie did not set this up in any way that this kid's going to be able to go full commando at this exact moment. I wouldn't have been surprised once this scene started rolling if she'd gone, snapped all the unicorns off her My Little Ponies, the horns off, and fashioned them into a bolo weapon to take out Peyton when she came around the corner. I'm like, damn, girl, you're working hard. You're doing stuff that I can't even think of. And she just trots it all out. It's just kind of this amazing swerve at the end, and I loved it.
Her character is actually based on John McClane.
Nah, that's a better example. McClane in the air duct would have been a much better example. You're right, Graham.
Although when Peyton discovers the baby monitor, I would have loved to have heard her be like, Peyton, I'm coming for you. Chun chun.
Now, if we could just get a movie with her and Macaulay Culkin as the same movie characters to now in a survival movie, that would be amazing.
That would have been awesome.
Another one of those classic moments to look at each other and go, I've been through this shit before.
Do you guys think The Good Son fits into this like style of movie too? It's not as much an erotic thriller, but it does feel like very real and weirdly plausible.
I haven't seen it, but I know the gist of it. And I'd say, anything that takes place in quote unquote the real world, with real world circumstances, as long as there's not some moment that's completely outlandish, like you're in the last 10 minutes and then the devil shows up out of a hellmouth, then I think so.
It's the subgenre domestic violence. Violence comes home to the suburbs or to the
roost,
to quote unquote the nuclear family.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Graham, did you have any other amusing moments?
I wanted to say again that it did take our hero, the wife, to throw the woman out the window twice. There were 2 attempts, and I actually went back and rewatched that, and you could cut that first attempt.
Yeah.
And not miss anything. Just have her just straight up throw her out the window, because she doesn't say anything after the first attempt that's important. Like,
no.
oh, let me give you this bit of information that you need to know. They just fight a little bit more, and then she throws her out the window. Just have her throw out the window the first time.
Yeah, we got it. We got it. Well, I'll just say that my other smoking with friends amusing moment was overly explaining why a fence is needed at the beginning of the film. Oh, I get it. I wonder if anything's going to happen involving this fence by the end of this movie. It was very much a Chekhov's fence.
I just love the question of, are you trying to keep people out or keep people in? This is the question that's posed by the mentally challenged handyman who's working for the lovely white couple from Seattle. It's amazing that's just a moment today where you go, nobody sees the problem here. But you are right, Rob. There's nothing. Every thriller does this. There's always Chekhov's inevitable instrument of murder that's shown far too early in the movie. Far too early.
It would have been great if the family was like, hey, we need like one of those like impaling fences.
We want to keep people on the fence.
Yeah.
I'm looking for one of those fences that could kill someone if they fall off, say, the roof of my house.
Yeah, you know, like in the movies?
Yeah.
How sharp do they make picket fence slats?
And can you make them sharper, please,
Yes.
Solomon? Bill, what's your final amusing moment?
Oh, man, here's my big term paper moment. So we've talked a lot about Ernie Hudson as Solomon in this movie and what we see as problems and things they could have done better. But I will say this. The entire attic showdown only happens because Solomon lets it happen. We've got a scenario where at the very end of the movie, he pops up in the attic. He's helping Emma escape. He's confronted. There's the showdown and all of this. But there are several moments where he basically stands up and tells Peyton, no, you're not going to hurt my friends. No. But he doesn't do anything. At one point, all he does is he grabs her arm. Now, Ernie Hudson, grown man, easily going to overpower Rebecca De Mornay's character. This whole scene could have been done with a bear hug, and he could have just held her there until the cops show up.
Yes.
But they wrote this scene, and clearly they needed the girl fight at the end that is the villain and the hero. But this is where I think they unintentionally justified their actions, because earlier on, he's the only one of this whole cast outside of Marlene who dies, who finds out what Peyton's up to. And one way or another, he sees the evil in her, and he's shut down. And he's shut down in a way that, of course, he's seen as confused and worried because he's mentally challenged. He doesn't want to cause a problem. So they're using what they would perceive as the thought pattern of this person to justify him not just getting the family out and going, hey, this chick be crazy. I seen it. Here's what's going on. Kind of the same thing here. This fight doesn't need to happen in any way. But I guess if you look at it and they go, well, there's the same reasoning here. He grabs her one time, but is he overriding his thought process of never lay hands on somebody, never hurt anybody, always be careful about what you're doing? And I think that's the case because it's the only way you explain this scene. And it's not a good explanation.
Yeah.
But it is an explanation. And I have a hard time thinking that this was the onset and this was what they really meant to do. I think they did it just as a method of convenience to let these things happen. And that's why they needed this character to not be what 1992 would have considered a normal, functioning, regularly mentally able adult. It had to have an Achilles heel that kind of lets these moments slide on by. And that's what we wind up with. And I wish he hadn't been there. I mean, I wish if he had showed up at the end, the very end, or anything like that, or had just been outside yelling, can I help? Can I help? And the scene, like you'd say, Graham, shorter, and Rob played out shorter in a different way. I think it works a lot better. But him actually being there, it's like, I get what you're doing, movie, but it's not good.
Yeah.
It's not a good ending. And in a lot of ways, it just sort of takes the last level of me being able to plausibly deny what I'm seeing and just chucks it out that very same window more than just one time. They only had to throw me out the window one time, Grant. So
Totally.
That's my
Totally.
take on his whole character.
Yeah, I completely agree. Guys, should we just jump into our like final thoughts and rate this thing?
Sure.
Bill, remind us how we rate our movies.
Well, we do this not 1, not 2, not 3, but we do 4 and then 5 nights for $1. If you went back in your video store back in the day, there was usually a rack of movies up by somewhere in the front or the back. It would say something like 5 nights for $1. You throw down your buck, you get your movie, keep it 1 night, keep it 5 nights. It's up to you, whatever you want. We do the same thing with these movies. We don't compare them to anything else in the series. No other movies, no sequels, no nothing. Just this movie. We've all walked in to Suncoast Video. Rob's used his employee discount, so he's probably getting it for like 59 cents.
Sure.
We've all picked up our copy. We've thrown our buck down. We've gone home. We've watched it. Now, how long are you going to keep The Hand That Rocks the Cradle? 1 night? 5 nights? What's it going to be, boys? I'll start with me.
Oh, I love it.
I know, because I've seen this movie before. Now I've seen it again, and in spite of its flaws, I really do like it. I had a good time watching it. Story's full of holes. If you just took a shotgun to it, they're all peppered in there. But the underlying current of the movie stays true, which is good. And the fact that it is a believable setting with a believable set of people and a possible set of circumstances, and doesn't ask me to believe anything beyond that people be crazy sometimes with their decisions, which I can do. It takes me along for a ride. I would not at all call this a horror movie. In some ways, it is a thriller. It's definitely a low-key thriller because there's very little violence in this thing. It's all mind games. And some of the mind games aren't that great, but Rebecca De Mornay is a whirlwind on the screen with this. She takes what she's given and she just blows right past everybody. She is, by leaps and bounds, the best thing in this movie. She carries it for me. So I would rate The Hand That Rocks the Cradle for sure. I'm going to keep it for a good 3.5 nights.
I'm
going to definitely be returning it midday, day 4, after probably a final run through of a few key fight scenes, and just watching her just tear that shower stall a new one. So that last half's going to be a clip show. But I watched it once. I definitely would watch it again because it's a good enough movie, and I'm going to get my money's worth out of it. So 3.5 for me.
I like that. Who should go next?
Rob, how about you?
Okay. Well, guys, not saying anything new that Bill hasn't said or that you haven't said earlier, Graham, but, I made the point that a lot of the things you can reach the same climactic points, character arcs, resolutions without having certain elements of the movie. Bill, you make a really good point about Solomon, and why he is the way he is. But that's a really easy tweak with another aspect too. Shortening that scene down, putting the person somewhere else, having a different sort of confrontation, giving him a little bit more agency. Why is Peyton acting the way Peyton acts? We could have had more tension, say, if we didn't know that the husband wasn't cheating on the wife with Marlene, right? If there was a little bit more mystery, if some of these things, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I enjoyed watching this too. As a film, it is there and it tells a story, and I didn't get bored and I enjoyed it. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, wait, but that was a choice. That was a distinct choice. And it does kind of feel like someone went in and said oh, we need to have set piece X and I want to have character Y and I need to have this relationship dynamic, and make sure all of that's in there on your next rewrite of this script. The script is good, but add these elements to it. And they just didn't get tied together in the same way. So I think I would rent this and keep it for 2 nights, one to watch for the story and the second to say, oh, that's the shoehorned in thing, and it could have been done a little bit different. And I would welcome this movie to have a punch up, right? Someone else could have taken it, or even the same writer could have taken it and gone let me bring this one around the block one more time and see if I can kind of like tighten the bolts on it a little bit. And we would have gotten, I think, we could have easily turned this into at least a 4-nighter after that for me. How about you, Graham?
I'm going to also say 2 nights, couple nights, and just to kind of watch the movie and then rewatch some of the funnier moments, but also Rebecca De Mornay's amazing performance.
Yeah.
I think I'm only giving it 2 because, like I said before, I'm a huge fan of the erotic thriller from that time era. And I just think it's kind of lower tier. I would return it after 2 days and pick up Crimes of Passion by Ken Russell or Basic Instinct by Paul Verhoeven.
Love it. Love it. Well, great having you back, Graham. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Pumpkin Spice Podcast?
Yeah. Well, we just dropped an episode on one of my possibly one of the best New York City slasher.
It's next to Jason Takes Manhattan. That's for
sure. I mean, if that's where the bar is set, then you're gonna love this movie.
It's better than Scream 6. I'll tell you that.
Okay. See, I haven't seen that yet, so I'll need to see. But no, William Friedkin was an amazing director.
And we're talking cruising, of course, like we mentioned earlier in the episode.
Yes. And I think everyone knows him for Exorcist or French Connection, but Cruising, To Live and Die in L.A. are incredible films. And then his best is probably Sorcerer. We're going to pay a little tribute to Friedkin by talking about one of his lesser known thrillers. That's probably to me, that and Body Double are like the art house slasher movies.
Yeah. And I think at this point, we'll also have started our, we've had a little George Romero film drop in the feed as well. That is not a zombie movie, surprisingly. So if everyone hasn't checked out Pumpkin Spice Podcast, you should go over there, especially if you've been enjoying Roboween on Bill and Rob's An Excellent Adventure. Now, Graham, I still am not sure if I want to call it Roboween or Rob-O-Ween, but Roboween seems to roll off the tongue a little bit easier.
I always had mistaken you for Alex Murphy.
Oh, really?
That's a horrible RoboCop reference joke.
Yeah.
And I'll apologize right now for that.
Wow.
Well, thanks again. This has been great. Bill, we got to thank Rob Adler for editing this and just being an all-around great guy. It's been a lot of entertainment, and he is making us sound the best as possible. And I guess we got to thank the patrons too, huh?
Well, I suppose if we really want to keep the lights on, we should. But absolutely, thanks to our patrons over on Patreon. You make this a lot of fun. Love your interaction. Feel free to do it more. So Rob and I are committed to getting over there and doing even more stuff online with you guys. So thank you for that. And thank you for spreading the word about the show. It's something that means a lot to us, and we really appreciate it.
All right. Well, next week we are finishing off Roboween. I know a tear has been brought to my eye as well. We're all wiping our tears here if you're watching the video. With, I could have ended on a high note, but I decided why not watch a Children of the Corn movie that no one has ever seen, 2001's Children of the Corn Revelation. So I have no idea what it is. I saw that it exists. I was very surprised. So it's going to be a journey for everyone involved.
I have to go out and get my hair dyed completely white. Both of us have to do that before we review this movie. We have to do it sitting in a field.
Yeah, probably. We'll be damned if we do and damned if we don't.
He walks behind the pod. He walks behind the pod.
All right. Well, see y'all next time on Bill and Rob's An Excellent Adventure.